Thank you very much. We'll now come to time for the round panel discussion and invite the speakers to come up to the front and you, the audience, to get ready with your questions.
So I'm Alison Tedstone. I'm the Chief Nutritionist from the Department of Health and Social Care, formerly at PhD. These have been a really stimulating set of talks, a really contrasting section of talks. I think one of the things I wanted to say there, that we have seen a 4% increase in childhood obesity during the pandemic. Those figures are shocking, and it's happened across all socioeconomic groups. And we've seen the whole curve shift upwards, so we have less underweight children than we've ever had before, and we have less underweight children than we'd expect from a healthy society. So we've heard various things, including in the last talk, about shifting the balance of what industry is selling. But I think there's a miss here about shifting the amount, and we kind of saw that in Judith's slides when you talked about proportions of things being sold, but not the absolute amount. And because the root of the problem with the nation's health is excess calories. We are consuming far too many calories, and that's happening not just because of choice, but because of the choices that are being offered to us and how our choices are being manipulated as adults. So I wanted to know what scope the panel think for reducing the amount being sold by the food industry. And I not just the proportions, because if we just change the proportions, we will not alter calorie supply. And in fact, the economic model that industry works to tells us that we will increase it.
So who would like to take up on Bob, are you going to go?
Yeah, I can have a go at it. Yeah. I think it's a great question, and it reminds me of an all-party parliamentary group that I attended, which was one of the presenters was Martin White, who is one of the fellow research leaders on one of the Transforming Food Systems programs from Cambridge, and he showed the increase in portion size of things like pizzas, and particularly in that out-of-home sector, which obviously those kind of companies, home delivery, has really proliferated during the pandemic. So I think with my policy hat on, if you are going to intervene in food retail, then you also need to intervene in the out-of-home sector as well. And for far too long, the standards in the out-of-home sector have been very, very different from the standards in supermarket retail. I do think there's a need for public information. I do think government needs to intervene in the food system. You can't just leave it to the individual. And I do think there needs to be public information around dietary health, portion size, and making dietary health the norm in the United Kingdom. Completely agree.
Thank you very much, Bob. Please.
I think the other thing is that I mean, it's a wicked problem you describe and something that's difficult to address. And what interests me is the fact that it requires many different types of interventions potentially to kind of move to address the issue. I mean, one can look at other dramatic changes and kind of what stimulated them. I mean, the incredible change on policies around single-use plastics, which got a huge shift amongst companies and the public, etc., which was a combination of kind of aspects of peer pressure, celebrity culture, government intervention, slight fiscal action, and recycling similar sort of transformations. So I think in this aspect that there can be aspects of policy intervention. I think without companies taking their role in it, we aren't going to get the shifts we need. But there also needs to be an element of kind of individual awareness or responsibility too. And I think that's how you get changes to happen quickly, is when you have multiple interventions coming through.
So I just
Judith.
Just add to that, because I agree with everything that everyone said, but the key for this is creating a level playing field. So I think Bob touched on it, and we talked about food service versus food retail. And we don't have that level ground on things like portion size. And I remember keeping the old MAF guidelines on, which I think dated back to 1994 or something, on what the portion size of bacon or sausages or all those things are. And of course, we've lost that, and we've got a free-for-all on portion size. So I think there is a section of things that just need to be put in place. But I'm a great supporter of what works in practice, and we've tried lots of things actually over the years, working with you and working with the World Resources Institute. And we've done things like editing choices for customers, so taking out 25% of a range so that all of the products fall within the PHE guidelines. And what happened when you did that in a category was those customers just shopped the store for other categories to find similar sugary products or chocolatey products in other parts of the shop. All it did was shift that purchasing around. But what really does work is focusing on the feel-good factor and encouraging customers with real incentives and rewards, which is what I touched on. So when you encourage positive behaviours, then you get a much better response. But you need to carry on encouraging those behaviours until they become habits. And that's the thing that doesn't normally happen in the way that foods are promoted. You know, the whole promotional cycle in the system is a 3-week cycle, and then it moves on to something else. So these are long-term interventions, but they do work in practice, and we know that. So more of catching people doing it right, and lots more carrot combined with a level playing field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other questions? Well, perhaps Christine. Yes, Christine Williams.
I hope this isn't a repetition, and we haven't conferred on this, Alison and I, but I think the arguments regarding, the Eat Well plate and the transition that would contribute to carbon emissions and so on, I think it's a very well-made argument and a very sound and stable argument. One of my concerns is one of the factors, if you like, if we look at plant-based diets in vegetarians and vegans, and we look at the types of foods that have been available to them in the open market in the past, they've been very limited, and so choice has been very limited. It reflects back. We are driven by novelty and choice and packaging and all those things. What I'm slightly concerned about is, as I have a vegan in my family, I've noticed how much easier it is for me to shop for my vegan, and I can buy magnums, I can buy all sorts of alternative meat substitutes, I can buy plant-based milks, cheese now. So is my vegan going to be as healthy as she was in the past? I just don't know. But the other term for some of these foods could be ultra-processed foods. And we've heard a lot about concerns about ultra-processed foods. So this issue becomes ever more complex as we try to transition from animals to plants, into the free world living situation. I don't envy any of us, really. I think we might have a question from you.
Shall I have a go, Christine? You're absolutely spot on. In many of the foods that have come through the innovation pipeline have been processed foods, and we don't know what that is going to do over the long term. And I think if you go back to what is the accepted nutrition wisdom, we would say that the less processed the food is and the more that it looks like a food that you recognise from an agricultural supply chain, then it's more likely to be better for you. I suppose the other side of this is that actually when you look at the greenhouse gas emissions that are linked to some of those foods, particularly some of the protein isolates that are used in analogues. So if you take a soy protein that's turned into something that looks like a chicken nugget, the greenhouse gas footprint of that product is far in excess of its natural alternative. And I think one of the things that we need to make very clear for particularly those customers that are buying things because of their concern around climate or the environment is not everything is as it appears. But of course we don't have the data and the labelling system to be able to say to somebody, you know, here is the nutrition, here are the greenhouse gases, here's the impact on nature or water, to be able to communicate that. And I think that is the big challenge, because people are making those choices, and comes back to your, you know, chuck out the misleading claims, making those choices because they genuinely believe that they are better for the planet, and they aren't always. And that's the thing that we need to get a hold of quickly.
If I could just perhaps follow up on that. Matt, you told us quite a bit about the startups that you were encouraging and nourishing that were developing these new products. How aware are they of the kind of issues that Christine talked about in terms of what they're doing?
Yes, so a few of them are trying to use alternative ingredients which are healthier, and a few of them which are plant-based. So one is made from tempeh, which is made from soy and typically sourced in Indonesia. And so that tempeh product is actually quite healthy, and it's an example of where, you know, a plant-based alternative, you know, to bacon or whatever it is that they manufacture into can be healthy. How it performs from a climate perspective is the other part of this, right? And so the better joined up we can all be in, on this, I think the better. And the Good Food Fund, which I mentioned, was very much a pilot, and it's something that we continue to learn on.
Great, thanks. Guy?
I think a really important point here is we need to get it right, because we don't want a Dieselgate on our hands when recommendations are made which then are subsequently found to be not the best for the climate or for your health. And it reminds me of it's a Dutch phrase, but it says, to translate it, it says, trust comes on foot and it leaves on horseback. And that's why when we make these decisions, we've got to get it right.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question now in the middle. Yeah.
Alan Malcolm, sometime chairman of the foundation. I weigh about 90 kilograms, but I noticed that many of our guests for lunch only weigh about 60 kilograms. Will the portion size reflect this difference?
Some of us might have run 20 miles to get here, so that's going to help us.
Hello, it's Jane Brookman from EIT Food. There's been several comments about we can't make any progress unless we can measure things. If we're going to measure things, what part should government play in the systems that are dictating or governing that measurement, and who should pay for it?
I can go first. So one of the recommendations in the National Food Strategy was around the role that mandatory reporting can play, and I think this is something that we will support, and we're working with Food Foundation and investors on to campaign for, which is to say that as a matter of course, food companies have to report on the healthiness of what they're selling, including fruit and vegetable sales, HFSS compliance, and a range of other factors, and it goes on to the environmental side of things as well. And so we think that's crucial. On who should pay for it, I'm more open to, I suppose, but it's likely to be taxpayers with a contribution from the corporate world.
John?
The key thing about measuring is it needs to be credible. And for me, the role, I had a very good visit from the British Standards Institute very recently, and their interest to step into this space, certainly to create a standard around sustainable ruminant production. And I think there's a real role for an organisation like the British Standards Institute to actually create a credible standard The measurement then against that needs to be independent. So when we went on our journey, we actually, we're in Ireland, but we went to Scotland. So we engaged Scottish Rural College as an independent organisation to us to actually give the independent assessment of our journey. So those are the two key things. In the area we're in, where we're delivering both a nutritional benefit and an environmental benefit, at the moment it's very difficult to find the marketplace currently paying for the measurement of environmental goods. It isn't happening at the moment, and if we leave it just the marketplace, it won't happen. And certainly in Northern Ireland, we have just announced in the last 3 weeks, we're going to measure every single field and every single hedge and ditch in the country, and that will be, government are actually going to lead on that, is they feel their role is actually to be the independent arbiter of what is happening there, is it changing, and is our measurement credible? Because there's no point measuring if we're not credible. If we can't convince concerned citizens that our journey is actually valid, then we're wasting our time. So I think there is a room for government, and I am very pleased that actually it's not always I can say the Belfast government leads in anything, but on this, they have taken real leadership. We will be the first part of the world to mandate that every single field is going to be measured.
Thank you very much indeed to the panel. Thank you very much for your questions, and I'll hand back to Judy. Thank you.